Seeing as this is the only kayak being built this year, I want to do something special. I want to put a mahogany coaming around the cockpit. But because of the curves and the twist of the deck around the cockpit, I'll have to make it in 4 sections, and each section is going to need to be laminated, steam bent, and then scarfed together. But before we get to the fun stuff, we got work to do. The first thing I'm going to do is mill up the forward and the aft laminations of both the port and starboard coaming pieces. I'll be using this piece of mahogany. You may notice that I'm not using my fence when I'm sending this board across the table saw. That's because this board isn't joined or planed and it's rough, and the lines that I measured aren't parallel to any edge necessarily. And that's okay. My next step is I'm going to send it to the planer, and then from there I'll have 2 parallel sides that I can use my table saw fence and join it up. I know I use the dead GoPro battery a lot as an excuse for missing footage, but as of the recording of this video I have 3 brand new batteries, so moving forward it'll just be my bad. So what you didn't see is after the planer I paralleled both edges on the table saw. So now what I have is a rectangular block ready to be cut in half, so I have my 2 laminations. But my saw isn't powerful enough to cut this board all in one go. Even the saw at school might be powerful enough to cut it all in one go, but we would have to feed the wood so slowly that it would burn. So I'm going to do this in 2 pieces, and notice when I flip, I'm making sure that the same side of the board is referenced against the fence. Particular piece of mahogany spent the last 15 years in my garage, and before that I don't know how long in my grandfather's shop. It's too dry to steam, so it needs to be rehydrated. I'm going to put it in this tote full of water for 4 days. On to the bending jig. It requires quite a bit of force to bend wood even though it has been steamed, so this is going to be a double layer of 3/4 inch plywood. So I use the cockpit pattern that we've used to cut out the cockpit. I'm going to use that as my guide. So we're going to trace it and then over to the bandsaw to cut. Whenever you're cutting with a bandsaw, a jigsaw, a handsaw, always, always, always leave the line. We'll get to the line in a little bit, but if you cut to the line, it's gone, and then your piece is going to be too small. So always, always leave your line.
We're see me in misery. Come over, baby, see my feet. No, 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 baby, it's alright. Oh, it's alright now. Hey, 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 yeah, yeah.
Oh, there's my line. Cool. And there's no bandsaw marks on it.
She knows how to shake that thing down, now. Yeah, she's alright. Oh, it's alright. Hey, 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 yeah. Can you play it one time for me, son? That's what I'm talking about now. Roll 'em, baby. She done gone with the red dress song. She can burn Atlanta all night long. Oh, it's alright now. Oh, it's alright. Hey, 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 yeah. I'm gonna tell you, mama, tell you, pa, gonna say you right now. I'm just so now. Mama, you don't do right. Yeah, don't do right. What I'm saying, tell me what I'm saying. Tell me what I'm saying. Tell me what I'm saying. Tell me what I say now. Tell me what I say. Oh.
Alright, so there's my aft bending jig. Now it's time to figure out what the front of this combing is going to look like. I don't want to match the cockpit opening with the front section. I want to go for a bit more of a classic look and bring it to a bit of a point. So I'm going to have to put a nail into this freshly sanded and faired deck. Look away if you're squeamish.
Make me feel so good, baby. You make me feel so good. Oh, yeah. So good. You make me feel so good now. You make me feel so good. Hey, one more time. Hey, one more time. Come on, one more time. Oh, one more time. Better one more. That's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been entertained by the genius of Ray Charles and his orchestra.
Alright guys, here's my steam generator. Put water inside it, and through this insulated hose comes steam. That steam gets injected into the box, and as you can see, there, you can hear it gurgling and bubbling. So the idea here is we shut this lid, and our pieces can steam inside there. Once these laminations have cooked in the steam box for the requisite amount of time, it's time to bend them on the jig. I'm using an old fan belt from a truck to keep the edge grain from tearing out as it bends around the jig. I have a fairly short time to work from the time the wood comes out of the box to the time I have it clamped up. So what the steam actually does is it softens the wood and allows the wood fibers to slide past one another without breaking, hopefully.
Your word is mine. Okay. right. Just show your face, broad daylight. I'm telling you on how I feel. Gonna get your mind. Don't you dare jump on, get on me. Alright, I'm giving you on count of three. Just show your stuff or let it be. I'm telling you, just watch your mouth. I know your game, what you're about. When they say the sky's the limit, and to me this really true. I'm a friend, you have seen nothing. Just a way to argue because I'm bad. Jump on, you know I'm bad. You know it. You know I'm bad. Jump on, you know. And the whole world has to answer right now just to tell you once again who's bad. The word is out, you're doing wrong. Won't lock you up for too long. No lying eyes gon' tell you right. So listen up, don't make a fight. Your talk is cheap, you're not a man. You're throwing stones at your hands. When they say the sky's the limit, and to me this really do. I'm a friend, you say nothing, just a way to argue because I'm bad. Jump on, you know I'm bad. You know it. You know I'm bad. You know it. And the whole world has to answer right now just to tell you once again who's bad. We can change the world tomorrow. This could be a better place. If you don't like what I'm saying, then I won't just slap my face because I'm bad. Jump on, you know I'm bad. You know it. You know I'm bad. You know it. You know. And the whole world has to answer right now just to tell you once again. You know I'm bad. Jump on, you know I'm bad. You know it. You know it. You know. Come on. And the whole world has to answer right now just to tell you once again. You know I'm mean. You know it. You know I'm bad. You know. Jump on. And the whole world has to answer right now just to tell you once again. You know I'm bad. You know it. You know I'm bad. You know. You know I'm bad. You know it. And the whole world has to answer right now just to tell you once again who's bad.
Once the pieces have had about 12 hours to cool off and set up on the jig, you can take them off and they'll retain some shape. All right, so these were left on the jig for, I think I left them on for a full day, full 24 hours. The next step is to epoxy them together, to laminate them together. On the first batch, because I was pressed for time, I really wanted to get to this stage. I wanted to be able to flip the boat over and continue glassing it, but I had to get the jigs removed from the boat before I could do that, and I rushed it. I wished I hadn't. They were a little bit too wet to epoxy. I did it anyway. Can you see that? So I had them glued. They glued up. They were off the jig for about a minute and a half, and they went pop, and they popped apart. The aft section didn't. It stayed glued up, and I think I can salvage this. I'm pretty sure I can salvage these, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow these other front sections to dry off for another couple days before I try and glue them. Next week's video, we're going to cover fiberglassing the bottom.